Work habit is quite different and personalities are quite different. And one solution doesn't fit all.
Not all the gaps are important, right? Yeah, that is one thing I also learned as a student during the PhD.
Obviously, the place is going to be different than what you're used to. You want to be flexible, give it some time, get used to it, be open to change.
Encourage them and say, well, they're not alone. They will be able to overcome those just like others did.
The first part is, how do you help students find their research interest and develop their own work? And the second question is, what do you think helps students to stay motivated when they experience common struggles such as imposter syndrome, procrastination, and unsuccessful research experiments?
What I try to do is, try to get an understanding of like how each student kind of works, because the work habit is quite different and personalities are quite different. And one solution doesn't fit all. I think what I try to do, have some guidance, of course, but also try to fit that kind of guidance into the personality or the working routines and all that sort of stuff. And this could also change based on whether the student is a research assistant and whether they're already working on a funded project, which makes things a bit smoother because there's already literature, there are some research questions, there are some methods already. I mean, the project is pretty much planned, but it's their task to identify what is the niche in there. So thinking about the niche, if the student is not a research assistant and they're in their first semester trying to develop some ideas, identify research questions and gaps. I mean, of course, as we all do, we start with literature review, how to search and find the relevant papers, maybe start from few, tend to go to tens of them, if perhaps later hundreds, but I don't like to overwhelm students. So make sure that this big task isn't just split into smaller multiple parts, that their task for the next 2 weeks is just like maybe looking at these 2, 3, or 4 papers and try to identify the gap in knowledge that we, and explain why that knowledge gap is important to fill, because it's not necessarily something that you find people not working on something is not necessarily important because it's unimportant, or it could be something very difficult to do. It would be lack of data or methodological complications. So I try to like help students identify these gaps. And I also, at the same time, I may have read the work most likely, but if not, I also read with them and try to like guide them through.
About how I help students find their research interest and develop their own work. I have about like 6-step approach. So the first step is about the student need to come up with a list of 5 to 6 keywords related to their research interest. For example, let's say environmental exposure, human daily mobility, inequality, something like that, broader themes, 5 to 6 keywords. And then of course that 5 to 6 keywords should be related to both of our research interests, right? And that is already aligned because only the person who have aligned with research interests are admitted to the program, right? So that is all the assumption that we have like common research interests. And then next step 2 is the student prepares a list of 8 to 10 peer-reviewed research articles that are closely related to their research interest. And then the next step is I as an advisor, review the list and provide feedback whether the list of papers are relevant or some important to the research topic. And also I like to add some key and signature papers to the list and removing irrelevant papers from the list. And then the next step 4 is repeat this step 2 and step 3. It sounds like an algorithm, but yeah, it's actually the algorithm workflow. So repeat the step 2 and step 3 until the saturation point. Of course, there is no some kind of a mathematical formula to know the saturation point. But what I mean by saturation point here is whether the student has a sufficient understanding of the relevant literature and the ongoing discourses related to the research topic. So for example, as Dr. Koylu already mentioned, not all the gaps are important, right? Yeah, that is one thing I also learned as a student during the PhD. So we need to know, even though there are gaps, we need to know whether they are important or not important. And that kind of learning process can be reiterated and can be done without having a conversation with an advisor. And then the next step 6 is write a research proposal based on the results of the literature review. And then when you write the research proposal, I approach in 2 ways. The first one is top-down approach, and another one is bottom-up approach. So for me, when I say about the top-down approach, is finding the research question based on the literature review. So to find the gap. But I also at the same time, it's important to do the bottom-up approach, indicating whether you can answer those research questions by using your data and available skill set. So for example, I, as the transportation and health researcher, are personally interested about what would be the health impact of autonomous vehicle in people's health outcome, right? I personally think that is a very important question to be solved, and then is a clear gap in the literature. But the problem is that we do not have empirical data, or we do not have some kind of actual experiment that can be so answer that research question. So from the top-down and bottom-up approach, we also need to think that 2 approaches at the same time. Whether you can come up with a research proposal that can be completed within a decent level of time. For example, master, it will be 2 years. For a doctorate, it will be 3 to 4 years. Last question is about what will help students stay motivated and when they experience common struggles. So this kind of thing is very typical as a research progress, right? Research is not, linear, direct, exponential increase thing, right? It's always up and down, but eventually you will go up to the goal, right? So throughout the research process, so I think the important thing is to keep encouraging students with positive feedback. So for my own philosophy is can-do spirit. So for example, he can do it, she can do it, they can do it. Why not me? Why not you, right? It's some kind of a can-do spirit. So by giving this kind of positive feedback to students, I encourage continued encouragement to overcome students' imposter syndrome, and also to overcome procrastination. I regularly organize weekly meetings and then check students' progress, because I believe the weekly meeting is a good way to avoid procrastination, because you do not want to share your advisor that, oh, I do nothing over last week. That is fine, right? If you are not feeling okay, then you cannot. It's okay that you do nothing for a week, but to avoid procrastination, that having this weekly meeting really helps you.
Yeah, usually I have a couple of ideas to suggest to students for research topics that we'll be talking about projects that are ongoing, and usually I can give some guided suggestions, and we feel our way forward with those topics. We meet frequently and regularly, and I think that's helpful to kind of help keep you on track, so that you feel like you're, seeing your advisor frequently. Like by that, I mean sort of weekly meetings, and you don't get too far off track with something or go down a rabbit hole that, could take you quite a bit of time. But rabbit holes are good too, actually. That can be useful. It's an important way to learn as well. And so we have actually at Maryland, we have a program for our first year PhD students. And so all first year PhD students would kind of go through this program, and really its focus is just to make sure you have a good first year, you get off the ground, you found a topic that's to your liking, that's working well, you're having some success with your courses. That first semester is a bit of a bear for students. It is a difficult semester, especially for international students who've moved country. There's a lot to get used to, but for any student starting in the program, you know, you're taking classes, it's a new cohort to meet. So there's a lot going on for sure. It's probably going to be your most challenging semester to get through. But you know what? Everybody experiences dips in that first semester. It's not unusual. Don't feel bad about it or think you're different or something, because you're not. Everyone has those kind of low points. It's not uncommon at all. Because it is a big change to go into a new graduate program like a doctoral program. So hang in there. You got to just hang in there with your courses. It's your busy, you know, first couple of semesters in a doctoral program when you're taking most of your courses, and get those behind you. So I think, you know, frequent meeting. Then I would just say having a lot of friends in the department really helps you get by, or kind of developing a bit of a new social network. If your department has a graduate student organization, they will put on activities for you that you can participate in, have a lot of fun, get to know the new area, and meet others through that. And otherwise, thank goodness we have video chatting, so you can chat with friends and family back home. You should do that regularly. Do it as much as you want. I mean, anything to make you feel more comfortable, and you can, you know, tell them all about your new experiences. And it's really a very exciting time. I guess I would throw back to one other characteristic, which I didn't think of for that first time, is that you want to, if you're going to be traveling at all, even to another part of the country, or if you're traveling international, obviously the place is going to be different than what you're used to. You want to be flexible, give it some time, get used to it, be open to change. If you're really close to that change, it's going to be a bit more of a bumpy road and a probably more difficult transition. So just be open and flexible for that.
The first is, how do we help students to find their research topic? I chatted with our colleagues in the department, and Dr. Grunstein, who is currently the graduate coordinator. We call him graduate coordinator, basically in charge of recruiting. Well, this is a very important part of his job, is recruiting graduate students. So we chatted about it, and he shared some really interesting points I want to share here, and then I follow up with my own thing. I agree with him in the first place. So what he thought about finding research interest is in current practices in academia, there are kind of two types of models. One is particularly in STEM area. You have, if the advisor already has funded research, basic students come in, jump into a research project. There's no room really for him to find his own topic. He jumped into it already with the funds. The other extreme might be, it's very open, particularly in, for example, in human geography or human-oriented. People are really, they want to be, advisors, professors want them to be independent researcher and say, well, find your own interest, find your own topic, right? So both models are currently available, and it might be challenging in different ways. The first one is easy, but there's a lack of opportunity for students to develop the process of identifying your research project. That's a very important part of independent, for being an independent researcher. So somewhere in the middle ground, he said, well, somewhere in the middle ground might be the best. I totally agree. So I just want to give him the credit. He shared this point. So in my practice, what we do is when students come in, I want them to try out. I will share my current research projects. They can come in, and even if they are RA, this is your job, you can do it, but it doesn't have to be your dissertation topic. Still want to give them enough opportunity to explore in coursework. For every course, usually we have a course project, term project, right? Research project. They can do a little bit things and different projects for different courses, and then they explore and find out their real interest. and go along the way that they are really interested in. And of course, through the process, we chat, we talk about things, just like Kathleen just shared, regular meetings. We have weekly meetings, actually bi-weekly meetings for groups. And then the other week we have individual meeting, as one-on-one meetings. So every week we have a chance to talk about things. So that's kind of identifying research topic. The other parts, the second portion of the question is about how to help students stay motivated. Related to the one, having some ownership of the topic, because they identify the topic, right? Even if it's from the research project, still they decided that's the way they want to go. So having some ownership probably will help them getting motivated and interested. And then how to help them when they experience imposter syndrome, all kinds of problems. Advisors support them with timely feedback, encourage supports. Even if there's real difficulty, we'll support them to overcome the challenge. If it's imposter syndrome, they are doing really well. Give them timely feedback. You are doing really well, right? It's not really, you did nothing wrong. So always, so they realize what's going on, the real picture. That's one part. And the other part is the peer support. I think Kathleen also mentioned having friends. By weekly meeting, the groups, the students actually, they work with each other really well. They know what's going on, and sometimes they collaborate. So that's really helpful. And the last part, I know I cannot talk too long. The last part is model in our own behavior. I think Junghwan also shared, and you said what we experienced it. So it's really model our own behavior. We were there before. Maybe sometimes it's still happening in our lives, but at least in the past, when we were students, we experienced a lot of those. So model in our own behavior, and share our stories, our experiences, how we did that. Or even if we didn't do this, and we probably saw other students, encourage them and say, well, they're not alone. They will be able to overcome those just like others did.